She's crying again, Dr. Cole. That's a violation. The paper hit my chest before I could even finish unlocking the door. Marilyn Dwyer, vice president of the Willow Creek HOA, stood on my porch in her pressed blazer and garden gloves, her expression a perfect blend of pity and authority. She tapped the violation notice against my shoulder, like a teacher scolding a child. This is your second warning, continuous infant disturbance. If this keeps up, the board will pursue formal nuisance proceedings. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My daughter had been home from the NICU for 10 days. 10. She weighed barely 6 pounds, her chest still rising unevenly from premature lungs, and the soft hum of the oxygen monitor beside her crib. "You're fining us?" I said slowly. "For my baby's crying?" Marilyn didn't blink. "It's not personal. Everyone deserves quiet enjoyment. You signed the covenant." That was the moment the air shifted. The quiet between us charged like a live wire. I stepped forward just enough for her to lose her footing on the edge of the porch tile. "You're standing on my property," I said. "And for the record, I wrote the acoustic calibration and standards this HOA uses. Those readings you rely on, I designed the equipment." Her smugness cracked for half a heartbeat. If you've ever watched someone weaponize a rulebook against a family, you already know where this is going. Subscribe right now, because what happened next had the entire neighborhood watching a courtroom livestream months later, as the same woman who fined my newborn was sentenced to babysit other people's children. I'm Dr. Nathan Cole, pediatric audiologist. I measure sound for a living. My wife Emily and I moved to Willow Creek for the promise of peace, clean air, trimmed lawns, and a community that looked like a postcard. I never thought I'd have to defend my family from silence itself. The irony isn't lost on me. I help children hear again. That's my work, my calling. But when my own daughter's first cries echoed off these perfect stucco walls, someone decided they were a violation. Marilyn didn't come alone that morning. Behind her, 2 HOA inspectors stood with clipboards, whispering to each other as if a baby's wail were graffiti. I could see my wife through the window, pacing the nursery, her body still recovering, exhaustion drawn like ink beneath her eyes. She'd been awake for 3 nights straight, terrified Ella's oxygen monitor would beep too late. That sound, the beep that kept our child alive, was apparently another offense. "This is harassment," I told Marilyn. "You have no legal right to—" She cut me off. "You'll find we do. If the noise continues, you'll receive daily fines until compliance is achieved. The community deserves peace, Dr. Cole." Peace! That word curdled in my mouth. She left the notice wedged in the doorframe, turned on her heels, and strode down my walkway as if she were the warden of quiet itself. I stood there for a long time, paper trembling in my hand, the sound of my daughter's soft cries floating through the monitor clipped to my belt. I'd recorded decibel levels in battlefields, airports, hospital wings, but nothing had ever sounded like this. The helpless noise of my own child turned into a crime. That night, Emily asked if we should move. She said it quietly, half apology, half plea. I told her no. We'd fought too hard to build a home that could cradle our daughter's recovery. The baby monitor beside us flickered like a heartbeat in the dark. "They don't get to decide what peace sounds like," I whispered. I spent the next hour studying the violation notice under the lamp. It cited Article 8, Section 3, sustained disruptive noise exceeding community tolerance. No measurements, no timestamps, just a line of accusation written in permanent ink. Every story like this starts small. One letter, one fine, one smug face smiling on your doorstep. You think it's just another neighbor dispute until you realize the system is built to grind you down quietly, one form at a time. But I wasn't some cornered homeowner. I had the tools to measure truth, and I knew exactly how to use them. Outside, sprinklers hissed through the night, a perfect suburban rhythm masking the steady pulse of the baby monitor. I slipped the notice into a folder, labeled it Evidence, and placed it beside my decibel meter. They thought they were dealing with another passive resident. They didn't realize they'd just fined the wrong man for the sound of life itself. I didn't sleep that night. Every time Ella stirred, I checked the monitor, watched the green light blink, and listened for the slow rhythm of her breath. By dawn, I was sitting at my desk in the small office off the kitchen, surrounded by technical manuals and calibration charts. The violation notice spread out in front of me like an autopsy. The paper wasn't just an accusation, it was bait. Marilyn wanted a reaction, something she could label as non-compliance. At 7:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with a community alert from the Willow Creek HOA portal. Residents are reminded of noise policies. Continuous disturbances, regardless of source, may result in board escalation. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Less than 12 hours after her visit, she had already weaponized the system. I opened the HOA group chat, something I'd ignored since moving in. The messages were worse than I expected. New baby in 7A keeping me up all night. If they wanted to run a daycare, they should have bought outside the complex. And then one from Marilyn herself. We're looking into it. No one should lose sleep over one family's choices. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. That's when I saw Trevor Lang's name appear in the chat. He didn't say much, just a single message. Maybe give them some... Grace, it's a newborn. His post was met with silence. I noticed a minute later that Marilyn deleted it. Emily came into the office, still in her robe, holding Ella close against her shoulder. They're talking about us again, aren't they? I minimized the screen. It's fine. It's noise, not truth. But it wasn't fine. The HOA's internal messaging app had become a public tribunal. Every ping from my phone carried judgment dressed as neighborly concern. Emily didn't need to see that. Her body was healing, but her spirit hadn't caught up. The postpartum tremor in her voice hadn't faded, and I knew stress could push her right back into the hospital. I spent the morning documenting. I logged decibel levels from every room, nursery, kitchen, living room, exterior walls. At Ella's loudest cry, the needle barely grazed 50 decibels, no louder than a conversation. I labeled the graphs, time-stamped them, and backed up the data. It wasn't defense, it was preparation. By noon, I walked down to the community courtyard for some air. The neighborhood looked like a developer's dream, symmetrical lawns, pastel doors, matching planters. But beneath the manicured quiet, I could feel the tension. Conversations hushed when I passed. One woman pretended to prune roses that didn't need pruning. Another turned away mid-wave. HOA gossip traveled faster than any siren. That's when Trevor approached. His mailbag hung off one shoulder, his cap low. "Dr. Cole," he said carefully, "I delivered another letter from the board. It's on your porch." "Another?" I asked. He nodded, uncomfortable. "I'm supposed to hand-deliver certified notices now. Don't shoot the messenger?" His attempt at humor faltered. He glanced toward Marilyn's house, a pristine white unit across the courtyard, then back at me. "Between you and me, she's overstepping. But I can't..." "You know." "I know," I said quietly. "You've got to keep your job." Trevor hesitated before walking off, but I caught the look in his eyes, something halfway between guilt and warning. That mattered. Even in a place ruled by bylaws, someone was still human. When I returned home, the new notice was already taped to the door. $500 fine for continued disturbance. No hearing, no measurement, no grace period. Just the word violation in bold letters. Marilyn's signature at the bottom looked almost proud. I scanned the document into my laptop and began cross-referencing HOA statutes. As I suspected, she'd skipped the required 3-warning process and filed it directly under repeated offense, which could only apply after multiple documented complaints by different households. She had one, hers. That was her mistake. For now, I stayed silent. Silence was strategy. Let her believe the fines worked, that we were retreating. The truth was, I'd already begun aligning the data with state noise exemption laws. Residential sound, made by children, pets, or medical devices, wasn't enforceable under civil nuisance. She'd picked the wrong family to intimidate. That evening, I took Ella out on the small balcony while Emily rested. The air smelled of cut grass and rain. I looked over the rows of perfect homes and wondered how many stories like ours had been buried under threats of compliance. How many parents had paid just to be left alone? Ella stirred and whimpered softly. Her cry carried across the courtyard, faint but pure, rising and falling like music against the night. Lights flickered on in nearby windows. Somewhere, I imagined Marilyn grinding her teeth. I smiled into the dark and whispered, "That's the sound of life, sweetheart. Let them try to silence it." The next morning, I found Trevor waiting beside the cluster of mailboxes near the community gate. He wasn't in uniform yet, just jeans, a worn jacket, and a look that said he'd been awake as long as I had. He pretended to shuffle envelopes when I approached, but his hands trembled slightly. "Morning, Dr. Cole," he muttered without meeting my eyes. "Got, certified mail for you again." I took the envelope. The HOA logo glared up at me like a warning brand. "Third one this week?" He nodded, chewing the inside of his cheek. "Marilyn dropped it off herself. Said it needed to be documented delivery. She stood right here until I stamped it." I studied him for a second. Trevor wasn't built for confrontation. Thin frame, quiet posture, but his eyes carried a kind of restless conscience. He rubbed the back of his neck every few seconds, glancing toward the security cameras at the gate. The guilt was visible in the way he couldn't stand still, the way his boot tapped a nervous rhythm against the curb. "She's pushing this harder than before," he said under his breath. "I shouldn't even tell you that, but man, she's obsessed. It's not about noise anymore." "What's it about?" I asked. He hesitated, his jaw clenched, and he folded his hands tightly as if to keep words from spilling out. "Control. She told the board you were testing limits, that you'd make an example of her if she didn't act first. Some of them believe her." The sun caught the metal gate, flashing against his eyes. He blinked, looked away. "Look, I've got a kid too," he said finally. 7 months old. When she started talking about constant disturbances, I thought about what that meant. Someone filing reports every time my daughter cried. It made me sick. I could see the fight happening inside him, duty versus decency. His fingers tightened around the strap of his mailbag, knuckles pale. He wanted to say more, to cross the invisible line between employee and witness, but fear pinned him in place. "I appreciate your honesty," I said quietly. "You don't owe her loyalty. You owe your own kid the kind of world where babies aren't treated like noise. Complaints." He exhaled shakily and looked around before lowering his voice. "She's been collecting videos, Dr. Cole, doorbell footage, audio clips. She says it's evidence, but it's not right. Some of those cameras belong to neighbors. She convinced them to share recordings." My pulse thudded. "She's recording my baby?" He nodded once, eyes down. "I didn't say that," he whispered quickly. "But you should check your HOA app. There's a new section under community documentation, password protected." He looked up, regret written across his face. "Don't tell her I told you, please." He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and walked away faster than necessary, shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. Every few steps, he stopped and half-turned, as if reconsidering going back, but then kept walking. The conflict was eating him alive, I could tell, caught between his paycheck and his conscience. Back home, I placed the latest notice on the counter beside the others. Emily glanced at it but said nothing. She just shook her head and went back to rocking Ella. The weight in her silence hurt more than words ever could. I opened the HOA portal on my laptop. After a few tries, I found the community documentation folder Trevor had mentioned. Password required. I remembered Marilyn's habit of using predictable codes, her house number, meeting dates, self-importance disguised as security. It took 2 attempts. The folder opened. What I saw made my stomach turn. Audio files, video clips, date stamps matching nights when Ella had been restless. I played one, faint crying, background chatter, someone whispering, "Record this. He'll have to comply when he sees the evidence." I froze. The voice was Marilyn's. For a long moment, the room felt colder, heavier. The baby monitor blinked beside me, steady and innocent. Recording life while someone else recorded violation. Emily looked up when she heard the playback. "That's her," she whispered. "She was outside that night." The pieces clicked together. This wasn't about noise. It was about power and humiliation. Marilyn was turning our child's pain into her proof. I saved the files, encrypted them, and uploaded backups to an external drive. Evidence cuts both ways. That night, I walked back to the mailbox cluster. Trevor's route had ended hours earlier, but I left him a note taped beneath the first box. "You did the right thing. I'll handle the rest." I didn't know if he'd ever respond, but the message wasn't just for him. It was for me. A reminder that even in a neighborhood built on silence, someone was still listening. By the next afternoon, I'd stopped checking the clock. The violation notices sat in a neat, poisonous stack on my desk, each one heavier than the last. But now I had proof. Audio clips Marilyn had no right to record. The question was how far she'd go before someone stopped her. I didn't have to wait long to find out. At exactly 3 o'clock, the pounding on my door rattled the picture frames. Emily froze mid-step in the hallway, clutching Ella against her shoulder. Through the peephole, I saw 2 HOA inspectors, both in bright orange vests, carrying clipboards and handheld meters. One of them pressed the doorbell repeatedly, the chime echoing through the house like an alarm. When I opened the door, Marilyn stood a few paces behind them, arms folded, her expression already rehearsed. "We're conducting a compliance inspection," she announced. "We've received multiple reports of sustained disturbances." "Disturbances?" I repeated, voice even. "You mean my daughter?" Her lips curved slightly. "We all sympathize, Dr. Cole. But sympathy doesn't override regulation. The community expects cooperation." Before I could respond, one inspector brushed past me, heading straight for the living room. The other walked down the hall toward the nursery. Emily called out from inside, "She's sleeping!" But he ignored her, tapping buttons on his meter as he stepped into the room. Ella startled awake, her thin cry slicing through the silence. The monitor lit up with warning tones. Emily shouted for him to stop. I took 2 steps forward, but Marilyn blocked the way, holding up her hand. "Please remain calm," she said sharply. "We need documentation." "Documentation?" I snapped. "You just caused the very thing you're here to measure." The inspector scribbled notes, muttering something about ambient spikes. Marilyn's satisfaction was visible in every tilt of her chin, every deliberate pause. She was creating her own evidence, one disruption at a time. I forced myself to breathe. Anger wouldn't protect us. Data would. I glanced at the digital display on my wristwatch, linked to my own calibrated decibel tracker. 47 decibels. Not even close to a violation. I snapped a photo of the reading, time-stamped it, and quietly saved it to my archive. Emily tried to soothe Ella, but the crying wouldn't stop. The inspector finally stepped back, pretending to jot readings while his device still blinked standby. Marilyn leaned against the doorframe, tone dripping with condescension. "You see, this is exactly what we're referring to. The noise carries. Imagine trying to relax next door. I imagine it's harder to relax knowing someone's recording my child without consent," I said. Her expression faltered. I took a deliberate step closer. "I found your private folder, Marilyn. The one labeled Community Documentation. You've been sharing files of a baby's cries. That's not enforcement. It's exploitation." The inspectors looked at each other, uncertain. For the first time, her composure cracked. "That folder is board property," she said too quickly. "Evidence collection is within our rights." "Not when it involves minors," I said, "and not without parental permission." She recovered her smile, brittle and tight. "You're welcome to file a grievance if you think you're entitled to one." "Oh, I will," I said softly. "But not with the HOA?" That wiped the smirk from her face. By the time they left, Emily was trembling. Ella had cried herself into exhaustion. I carried her back to her crib and sat in the nursery until the monitor light steadied again. Every soft breath she took reminded me why I couldn't let this stand. An hour later, I drove to the sheriff's substation outside the community gates. Deputy Harris, the same man who'd served the nuisance notice, met me in the lobby. His eyebrows lifted when I laid my phone on the counter and pressed play. Marilyn's voice filled the small office, her whisper clear. "Record this. He'll have to comply when he sees the evidence." The deputy listened without interrupting. When the clip ended, he nodded once. "That's enough to file a harassment and privacy complaint," he said. "And if those inspectors entered without consent, we've got trespass too." For the first time in weeks, my pulse slowed. The system that had been used against us was about to turn on its architect. When I left the station, the sun was setting behind Willow Creek's perfect roofs. The air felt sharper, cleaner, like something invisible had finally cracked open. Marilyn wanted quiet? She was about to get the kind only law enforcement could deliver. The next morning, the neighborhood looked different, quieter, but not in the peaceful way Marilyn preached. Doors stayed half closed when I passed, blinds tilted just enough for eyes to peek through. Word had spread. By noon, everyone in Willow Creek knew a sheriff's report had been filed. I parked outside the community clubhouse, the building where every HOA meeting took place. The sun reflected off its tall glass windows, sterile and cold, like the inside of an operating room. I wasn't here for confrontation this time. I was here to collect data. Inside, the air conditioning hummed louder than conversation. The long table in the conference room was lined with binders, financial ledgers, and laminated rules. HOA armor. I recognized the inspectors from the day before, both avoiding my gaze. Marilyn stood near the head of the table, phone pressed to her ear, whispering sharply. When she noticed me, she ended the call and smiled the kind of smile people wear when they've already decided you're guilty. "Dr. Cole," she said, "I hope this visit means you're ready to discuss compliance." I ignored the bait. "I'm here to review the sound ordinance you're using for your violations. I've requested it twice, and under HOA code, you're required to make it available." Her smile stiffened. "Those are internal documents." "No," I said evenly. "They're regulatory and therefore public within the community." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she gestured to a stack of folders. "Fine, but you'll find everything in order." I flipped through the pages quickly, charts, amendments, and minutes from meetings. Every reading cited was measured using handheld consumer-grade meters, not the Class 1 equipment required for enforceable sound readings. That alone disqualified their so-called evidence. I leaned back in the chair. "You're enforcing laws with invalid tools." Marilyn's tone turned sharp. "Are you accusing the board of misconduct?" "I'm stating a fact," I said, "and I'm filing a motion to have these violations voided." Her jaw flexed, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty break through her veneer, but she didn't back down. "We'll see what the board decides." When I left the clubhouse, the inspectors followed me into the parking lot. One of them, the younger of the two, stopped me near my car. "Sir," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching, "we didn't want to come yesterday. She told us we had to. Said the board voted, but there wasn't any vote." "You have any proof of that?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not written, but she called us on speaker. The other members didn't even know." That was all I needed to hear. Unauthorized action, fabricated board orders. It meant the HOA's enforcement lacked legal standing. The more Marilyn pushed, the deeper her foundation cracked. I thanked him, and as I drove away, my phone buzzed with an email from the county sheriff's office. The subject line read, "Case accepted. Privacy complaint number 2579. My report had been validated, officially entered into record. That night, I told Emily. She sat at the kitchen table, her face pale from exhaustion, but lighter than it had been in weeks. "Does that mean it's over?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But now, everything she files will be reviewed by law enforcement. That means oversight." She nodded slowly, eyes filling. "I just want Ella to grow up somewhere safe." "She will," I promised. After she went to bed, I stayed up working. Using my acoustic calibration software, I ran a comparative analysis between my Class 1 readings and the cheap models listed in the HOA's documents. The difference wasn't small, it was catastrophic. Their equipment inflated results by up to 12 decibels, enough to turn normal conversation into a so-called disturbance. That was the hidden trick Marilyn had been using to make her fines seem legitimate. I printed the report, labeled it Variance Analysis, and slipped it into a binder beside the violation notices. This wasn't just defense anymore, it was building a case. Before shutting down my computer, I checked the HOA chat one last time. Marilyn had posted a new message. Certain residents continue to challenge community standards. Rest assured, the board is addressing it. The replies were short. One neighbor wrote, "Maybe the sheriff will address you." First, another posted a single emoji, scales of justice. For the first time, Marilyn didn't reply. I turned off the lights, walked into Ella's room, and stood beside her crib. The monitor hummed quietly beside her, its green light steady against the dark. I placed my hand on her back, feeling her small breaths rise and fall. They'd built their power on silence, but silence, when measured correctly, always tells the truth. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house, every click from the thermostat, every creak in the walls set my nerves on edge. Emily slept lightly beside me, one arm draped protectively over Ella's crib. The sheriff's report was filed, but I knew Marilyn wouldn't stop. She'd built her identity around control, and losing it would make her desperate. By morning, the first shot came in the form of an email. Subject: immediate board review. She'd called an emergency HOA meeting for that evening, citing hostile conduct from a resident under investigation. My name wasn't printed anywhere, but everyone in Willow Creek knew exactly who she meant. At 8 sharp, I walked into the community park, a manicured stretch of grass and benches behind the clubhouse. Tonight, it looked like a stage. Folding chairs formed a semicircle around the gazebo, where Marilyn stood with a clipboard, pretending this was business as usual. A crowd of 30 residents murmured in the fading light, eyes darting between her and me. "Thank you all for attending on short notice," Marilyn began, her voice projecting like a sermon. "This meeting concerns ongoing disturbances and the unfortunate escalation involving law enforcement. We'll be discussing potential remedies." Remedies. That was her euphemism for punishment. I took a seat in the front row, decibel meter clipped to my belt, recorder running in my pocket. If she wanted theater, I'd make sure every line was on record. A man from the maintenance committee raised his hand. "Is it true you called the sheriff on one of our neighbors?" Marilyn smiled thinly. "A misunderstanding. The board's actions were purely procedural. Unfortunately, some individuals have exaggerated events online. That was the opening I needed." "You mean the posts where residents said you recorded their children?" Her composure flickered, just enough for a few heads to turn. "Dr. Cole," she said, tone sharp, "you're not recognized to speak." "Then put it to a vote," I said. "The bylaws allow any resident to address the board if the topic directly involves them." The crowd murmured agreement. Marilyn's jaw tightened, but she had no choice. "Fine," she snapped. 2 minutes. I stood, hands steady, voice calm. "2 weeks ago, you entered my home without consent. You woke a sick infant to manufacture noise evidence. You shared recordings taken without permission through a private HOA server. You've filed fines that exceed the limits allowed. Under our community charter, every one of these actions is now under review by the sheriff's department." Silence blanketed the park. Even the fountain nearby seemed to hush. Marilyn laughed, a brittle, performative sound. "You're twisting facts. Those recordings were a part of a compliance review." I held up my phone. "I have your voice on record saying he'll have to comply when he sees the evidence. Want me to play it for everyone?" The color drained from her face. A few neighbors exchanged glances. One older woman whispered, "That's illegal, isn't it?" Another nodded. Someone else muttered, "She's gone too far." Marilyn turned on them. "You're all forgetting why this board exists, to protect the quality of our neighborhood." Her voice cracked on the last word. From the back of the crowd, Trevor stepped forward. His mailbag hung at his side, though he wasn't working tonight. He looked pale but resolute. "She's telling the truth," he said. "I heard her order the inspectors to fake a reading. She told them, and I quote, 'make it look disruptive.' I kept quiet, but I can't anymore." Every head swiveled toward him. Marilyn's hand trembled as she pointed at him. "You're a delivery worker, not a member of this board." Trevor met her gaze evenly. "I'm also a homeowner and a father." His voice shook, but his eyes didn't waver. "You said no child belongs in Willow Creek if they make noise. I guess you forgot what it's like to be human." The tension snapped like a wire. Conversations broke out, hushed and furious. Marilyn tried to shout over them, but her words drowned in the noise she once claimed to hate. I turned and met Trevor's eyes. He gave a small nod, an unspoken pact between two fathers. The crowd might not have realized it yet, but the board's authority had just cracked in public. That night, as I carried Ella home through the dark, I finally felt the first shift in power. The law was watching now. The neighborhood was awake. The next morning, I found a folded envelope wedged beneath my windshield wiper. No name, no return address, just my unit number written in uneven letters. I glanced around the parking lot. The sun hadn't even cleared the roofs yet, and the streets were empty. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper and a flash drive taped to the corner. The note read, "I can't stay silent anymore. You were right. T." I locked the car doors, heart pounding. Trevor. At home, Emily was feeding Ella when I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The folder inside was labeled Meeting Audio. I pressed play. Marilyn's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "File the complaint today," she was saying. "List the inspector names, copy the sheriff's office. It doesn't matter if it's accurate, just get it on record." A male voice, one of the inspectors, hesitated. "But there haven't been any new disturbances." Marilyn's tone turned icy. "There will be. Schedule a follow-up inspection this weekend. I'll handle the justification." I paused the recording. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "She planned it," she whispered. "She manufactured every violation," I said quietly. "This is premeditated harassment." The evidence was damning, but the voice that followed next hit even harder. It was Trevor. "You're going to get someone hurt, Marilyn. That baby's premature." She laughed. Then maybe her parents should have thought about where they moved. Willow Creek isn't a hospital ward. My jaw tightened. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Emily reached over, resting her hand on mine. "You have to give that to the sheriff." "I will," I said. "But first, I need to talk to him." An hour later, I found Trevor behind the Community Post kiosk, sorting envelopes with slow, deliberate movements. He looked like a man carrying the weight of something heavy he'd finally decided to drop. When he saw me, his shoulders stiffened, but he didn't run. "You got it," he said softly, eyes on the ground. "I did." He nodded once. "I recorded that meeting last week. Couldn't take it anymore. She made us lie on inspection reports, said anyone who disagreed would be written up for non-compliance." His voice cracked slightly. "I've got a baby too, remember? When I heard her say yours didn't belong here, He stopped, pressing his palms against the mailboxes as if steadying himself. "I knew I'd crossed a line just by standing there." "She threatened you?" I asked. Trevor laughed bitterly. "Not directly. But when people like her control the HOA, they don't have to threaten. They can fine you into submission, or make sure your renewal request disappears. It's quiet punishment, the kind that eats you slowly." I watched him struggle to keep his composure. His shoulders were hunched, eyes red, fingers tapping the same rhythm against the metal box door. "She's got contacts," he continued. "Realtors, appraisers. She's been bragging about how she can tank property values for anyone who crosses her. Said she'd make your screaming baby the reason prices drop." I felt the familiar cold focus settle in, the same calm I used to get before high-stakes medical tests back in residency. "You have timestamps?" He nodded. "All embedded in the recording. She held the meeting in the clubhouse after hours. No official minutes, just her inner circle." That confirmed what I already suspected. Unauthorized activity, recorded evidence, intent to harass. A trifecta the sheriff's department wouldn't ignore. I handed Trevor my card. "Deputy Harris will need a statement. You're not the villain here. You're the reason this stops." He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the houses behind us. "If I testify, she'll come for me." "She already has," I said. "The difference now is she won't get away with it." He studied me for a moment, weighing the cost of courage, then exhaled. "I'll do it. For my kid. For yours." Later that afternoon, I met Deputy Harris at the substation again. I played the new recording in his office, watching his expression harden with every word. "This," he said, "is enough to trigger a subpoena. We can request full HOA meeting logs and her communication records." Finally, something tangible, momentum. When I left the station, Trevor was waiting outside, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "It's done," he said quietly. "She'll know soon enough." "Are you ready for that?" I asked. He gave a weary smile. "No, but maybe it's time someone else feels what we've been feeling." We shook hands beneath the dull afternoon sky, two fathers bound by exhaustion and resolve. The truth was out now, crawling into light where it couldn't be buried. As I walked back toward Willow Creek, I realized Marilyn's power had never been silence. It had been fear, and Trevor had just destroyed it. By the time I reached home, the neighborhood felt different. Curtains twitched as I passed, people who once looked away now meeting my eyes. Rumors traveled fast in Willow Creek, faster than truth, but this time they were starting to overlap. The sheriff's car had been seen outside the HOA office that morning. Marilyn's composure, that ironed-on calm, was beginning to fray. I set my briefcase on the counter and opened my laptop. The folder labeled Evidence was growing. Sound logs, video captures, screenshots of HOA posts, and now Trevor's recordings. I'd cross-referenced every timestamp with HOA bylaws. The violations weren't just moral, they were procedural. Unauthorized inspections, unlawful recordings, falsified reports. Each one was a nail waiting for the hammer. Emily stepped into the room quietly, still wearing her robe. "The neighbors are talking," she said. "Sandra from Unit 9 told me Marilyn canceled next week's board meeting, said she's revising policy language." "That's not policy," I said. "That's panic." She hesitated before adding, "I heard her car outside earlier. She stopped by the park, talking to those inspectors again." Of course she did. Cornered people don't retreat, they scramble. I pulled up a blank document and began drafting the formal summary Deputy Harris requested. Every incident had to be dated, every claim supported. Facts, not emotion. Emotion was how Marilyn baited her victims. Facts were how I'd dismantle her. But part of me wanted more than justice. I wanted exposure. For every family who'd been fined for a wind chime, for every homeowner shamed into selling because their child laughed too loud, I wanted her legacy burned clean. That evening, I drove downtown to meet my attorney friend, Robert Hayes, at his office. Robert specialized in property disputes and had dealt with HOA overreach before. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses as I finished explaining everything. "Jesus," he muttered. "This isn't a complaint anymore, Nathan. It's a systemic abuse case." "I don't want a lawsuit," I said. "I want her stopped." "Then we start with state housing mediation," he said. "The sheriff's already investigating privacy violations, but we can file a formal petition for injunctive relief, force the board to freeze all enforcement actions until the investigation's complete." He reached across the desk. "Do you have documentation proving they acted without board votes?" I slid Trevor's transcript across to him. "Every word." Robert skimmed the page, eyes narrowing. "This is gold, but you'll need public pressure too. If the sheriff's office moves slowly, the court of public opinion won't." "I've already got that covered," I said, opening my phone. I showed him the HOA chat thread. A dozen residents demanding Marilyn's resignation, one post already gaining traction on a local forum. "They're starting to turn," Robert smiled faintly. "Then let them. Once word spreads that she weaponized noise complaints against a premature baby, she's finished." As I left his office, rain began to fall, thin and cold, turning the parking lot lights into halos. The drive back to Willow Creek felt like a countdown. My plan was simple. Send the formal summary to the sheriff, CC the State Housing Board, and copy the HOA mailing list. No threats, no anger, just evidence laid bare for everyone to see. When I got home, Emily was asleep on the couch, Ella curled against her chest. I moved quietly, opened my laptop, and began typing the email. Subject, formal notice, pattern of HOA misconduct. Attached, decibel analysis, privacy recording. Evidence, meeting transcript, statute references. Body. This correspondence serves as an official notification of misconduct by Willow Creek HOA leadership, specifically Vice President Marilyn Dwyer. I kept writing, carefully, clinically. Each paragraph was another layer of armor around my family. When I finished, I hovered over send, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. Then, from outside, headlights swept across the living room wall. I stood, heart racing. Through the blinds, I saw Marilyn's car idling near the curb. She was in the driver's seat, phone pressed to her ear, face lit by the blue glow of her screen. She stared at my house for a long time, unmoving. I didn't open the door. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I pressed send. The message launched, a digital trigger that would end everything she'd built. Marilyn's car rolled away slowly, disappearing into the dark. The baby monitor glowed beside me, steady and green. For the first time in months, I didn't hear fear in its hum. I heard progress. By morning, the email had detonated across Willow Creek like a controlled explosion. The HOA forum, usually a wasteland of lawn disputes and recycling reminders, had turned into a public inquest. Threads multiplied, screenshots, theories, and disbelief. Some defended Marilyn, but most didn't. The subject line I'd written, formal notice, pattern of HOA misconduct, was already trending on the local community app. I opened my phone to find dozens of unread messages from neighbors I barely knew. "We're with you. They fined me for wind chimes last year. Thank you for standing up." Someone even posted a photo of their violation notice beside Ella's baby monitor, captioned, "They called life a disturbance." The sheriff's office confirmed receipt of the evidence before sunrise. Deputy Harris left a voicemail that morning, steady, professional, but with a tone that carried weight. "Dr. Cole, we've opened an active investigation into Willow Creek HOA leadership. We'll need statements from residents. You did the right thing." Emily listened to it twice, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "She can't touch us anymore," she said softly. I wanted to believe that, but power doesn't vanish quietly. It lashes out first. By noon, I was called into a special hearing at the county courthouse, a preliminary mediation session between the HOA and the sheriff's legal counsel. It wasn't a trial, not yet, but the board had been summoned to answer for their conduct. I packed every file, every timestamp, every sound reading, and the flash drive Trevor had given me. The courthouse was modern but sterile. White walls, faint smell of paper and coffee, the echo of shoes against tile. Marilyn was already there when I arrived, surrounded by 2 board members who looked more nervous than loyal. Her pastel blazer couldn't hide the pallor beneath her makeup. For once, she didn't look like a queen among peasants. "Dr. Cole," she said coolly as I passed, "you've caused quite the commotion." "Just holding people accountable," I replied. "You taught me that, remember?" Her jaw flexed, but she said nothing. Inside the mediation room, Deputy Harris sat across from her, his posture calm but unyielding. A county legal representative joined via video call, and a clerk began recording. I was sworn in first. I laid out the facts, dates, evidence, and recordings in clean clinical order. Every violation Marilyn filed, every unauthorized inspection, every falsified reading. I played the clip of her voice whispering, "Record this. He'll have to comply." The words hung in the air like a confession. When it was her turn, Marilyn tried to regain her rhythm. She spoke about community values, about maintaining harmony, about uncooperative residents. But when the legal representative asked if she had written consent to record minors, she froze. Her pen slipped from her hand. Deputy Harris cleared his throat. "For the record," he said, "our SAO office has confirmed that the files collected from the HOA's private server contained multiple recordings of underage children taken without permission. That constitutes a civil privacy violation under state law." A murmur rippled through the small audience of residents who had quietly filled the back row. One of the board members leaned toward Marilyn and whispered urgently. She ignored him. "I was protecting the community," she insisted. "Those recordings were evidence." "Evidence you created," I said. Her head snapped toward me, but the damage was done. The county attorney noted her admission, word for word. The hearing ended with a formal statement. The HOA's enforcement powers were suspended pending full audit. Marilyn's signature privileges were revoked. The board was ordered to cooperate with investigators. The room emptied slowly, filled with the rustle of papers and the soft hum of whispered conversations. Trevor met me outside in the corridor. He'd testified earlier by statement, but now he looked lighter, like a man finally freed from a secret too heavy to carry. "She's finished," he said. "Not yet," I answered, "but she's falling." That evening, the story hit the local news. A small segment on Channel 5. HOA under investigation for privacy violations after family's complaint. They used a blurred shot of our street, the words "unauthorized recordings" flashing beneath the anchor's serious expression. By the next day, the county hotline was flooded with calls from other homeowners across the state, sharing similar experiences. Marilyn had accidentally sparked something bigger, a reckoning. When I tucked Ella into her crib that night, the house felt different. Not quiet, not loud, balanced. The kind of peace earned, not enforced. I glanced out the window toward Marilyn's house. Her blinds were closed, the porch dark. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel watched. I felt free. The next morning, the calm didn't last. By sunrise, reporters had gathered outside the community gate. Their vans lined the curb like silent judges, antennas stretching skyward. Someone had leaked the sheriff's report summary. The words "unauthorized surveillance of minors" had turned a quiet HOA dispute into a public scandal. Emily peeked through the curtains, clutching her coffee. "They're really here," she whispered. "All because of us." "Because of her," I corrected. "We just told the truth." Still, truth had a cost. By noon, the board sent an emergency notice to all residents, an open forum to restore community trust. It wasn't optional. Attendance was strongly encouraged. I recognized the language. It was an attempt to contain fallout before the state stepped in. That evening, the community center parking lot overflowed. Cars filled the nearby street, and neighbors who hadn't spoken in months stood in small, uneasy clusters. Inside, fluorescent. Lights buzzed overhead. Folding chairs lined the gym floor, a podium set up at the front with the HOA seal printed in glossy ink. Marilyn stood behind it, pale but still posturing, her notes trembling in her hands. 2 county officials sat nearby, observing. Deputy Harris leaned against the wall near the back, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room. I took a seat in the 3rd row with Emily and Trevor beside me. The chatter quieted when Marilyn began. "Residents of Willow Creek," she started, "we've endured a difficult few days. Allegations have circulated, some exaggerated, some entirely false, about how your board maintains order. I want to assure everyone that we acted in good faith." A ripple of uneasy murmurs passed through the crowd. She ignored it and continued. "Noise policies exist for everyone's benefit, but certain individuals," her gaze cut toward me, "chose to weaponize misunderstanding into public spectacle. They've invited outsiders to interfere in our community's private matters." I stood before she could finish. "You mean law enforcement?" Gasps rippled through the room. Marilyn's expression hardened. "You're not recognized to speak." "That's fine," I said. "The county recognizes me." Deputy Harris straightened slightly, his presence suddenly felt. The county observer nodded, allowing me the floor. I turned to face the crowd, scanning faces, neighbors, parents, retirees. "You all know my name by now. You've seen the stories. You've probably read the emails. So, let's talk about what actually happened. My baby, our baby, was labeled a disturbance. Her cries were called violations. We were fined for existing." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the air vents. I raised my phone and tapped play. Marilyn's recorded voice echoed through the speakers. "There will be disturbances. Schedule another inspection. I'll handle the justification." The impact was instant. The sound of truth replaced every rumor. People shifted, whispering to each other. One woman covered her mouth. A man in the back muttered, "She planned it." Marilyn's face drained of color. "You can't play that here. That's stolen property." "It's evidence," I said, "and it's already in the sheriff's hands." Deputy Harris spoke for the first time. "She's right about that. The file's entered into record." Marilyn tried to recover, but her voice trembled. "I only wanted order. Peace." "Peace isn't silence," I said. "It's safety. And you made people afraid to live in their own homes." Trevor stepped forward from the aisle. "She threatened to fire inspectors for refusing to fake reports," he said, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. "She told us to make it look disruptive. I was there." Gasps filled the room again. The county official beside the podium whispered something into his tablet and rose to speak. "Effective immediately," he said. "Vice President Dwyer, you are suspended from all HOA duties pending formal removal." Marilyn froze, gripping the podium like it might save her. The sound of applause began softly, then grew, measured, controlled, almost cathartic. For a moment she looked at me, not with rage this time, but disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend a world where she wasn't in control. Then she gathered her papers and walked out, head bowed, past the deputies waiting near the door. As the crowd dispersed, neighbors approached, quiet thank yous, a few apologies. The first lightness I'd felt in months settled over me like breath after drowning. Emily reached for my hand. "It's over," she said. I looked toward the empty podium, the seal of Willow Creek glinting beneath the harsh lights. "Not yet," I said. "But now, everyone can hear what peace really sounds like." The next morning, the air over Willow Creek felt electric, quiet but charged, like the pause before thunder. By noon, the community group chat was exploding. Someone had leaked video from the night before, my confrontation with Marilyn, her removal, and the crowd's reaction. It had already hit local news. The caption read, HOA vice president removed after targeting family's newborn. Reporters returned to the gates, joined now by camera crews. A satellite van idled beside the manicured hedges that once symbolized control. The HOA board called for an emergency press conference to clarify events. No one believed it would help, but everyone came. By 5 o'clock, the entire neighborhood gathered in the central courtyard, the same space where, months ago, Marilyn had fined me for having non-compliant garden lighting. Now, the same lights glowed warm and steady across hundreds of faces. Folding chairs formed rows before the stage. At the edge, a podium had been set up with the HOA seal still intact. Marilyn wasn't there. Instead, the remaining board members stood rigidly, flanked by the county housing liaison and a pair of deputies. Deputy Harris stood near the steps, his expression carved from granite. I waited with Emily and Trevor near the center aisle, surrounded by neighbors who, for the first time, weren't avoiding eye contact. The liaison stepped to the mic. We're here today to address the violations under investigation and the ongoing audit of Willow Creek Homeowners Association. His tone was formal, steady. Certain board members acted without authority, leading to breaches of privacy and harassment. Effective immediately, the county is assuming temporary oversight of community operations until proper elections are held. A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Relief, anger, vindication. But the hush that followed wasn't peace, it was anticipation. The liaison continued. Before we adjourn, we're allowing one public statement from the affected resident whose complaint initiated this. Process, Dr. Nathan Cole. Every head turned toward me. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. The faces, neighbors, inspectors, even the sheriff's deputies, blurred under the courtyard lights. Emily's hand brushed mine. Go, she whispered. I walked to the podium. The microphone caught my breath before my words. Some of you knew me before this started, I began. Some didn't. I moved here because this neighborhood looked like safety, order, harmony, community. What I didn't realize was that peace built on fear isn't peace at all. A few nods scattered through the crowd. When my daughter came home from the hospital, I continued, she weighed 5 pounds. Her lungs were underdeveloped, her breathing machine louder than her cries. That sound saved her life, but here, that sound was called a violation. Murmurs filled the air. A woman in the front row pressed a tissue to her eyes. I spent weeks trying to reason, to explain. Instead, they recorded her. They filmed her pain, not for proof, out of cruelty. I paused, scanning the faces. If you ever wondered how ordinary people let cruelty grow, it's because they mistake silence for civility. The words hung heavy, cameras flashed. I glanced at Deputy Harris near the back. He gave a single, slow nod. Last night, I said, Marilyn Dwyer was removed from her position. But this isn't just about one person. It's about how power hides behind paperwork, how empathy gets lost between bylaws. So, if this neighborhood wants to start over, it starts by remembering that rules don't make us safe. People do. Applause broke out, uneven at first, then rolling through the courtyard like a storm catching wind. Some people stood, others shouted my name. Trevor, standing off to the side, clapped with both hands, tears streaking down his face. When the noise finally faded, the liaison returned to the mic. Thank you, Dr. Cole. On behalf of the county, I can confirm that Ms. Dwyer has been formally charged with invasion of privacy and harassment. As part of her community service sentence, she'll be placed under supervised duty at the County Child Care Center. The reaction was instant, gasps, murmurs, and even laughter. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's poetic." Emily squeezed my hand. "She's going to babysit," she said softly, half in disbelief. I looked out over the audience. Neighbors who had once turned away now united by something larger than grievance. The circle was complete. Deputy Harris raised his voice from the steps. The law worked here because someone spoke up. Don't let that be rare. As people began dispersing, I stayed by the podium, the soft hum of conversation washing over me like rain after drought. Above us, the courtyard lights flickered, and for the first time, the sound of children playing didn't feel like background noise. It felt like victory. The courtyard lights dimmed as the crowd thinned, their voices fading into the soft hum of distant crickets. I stayed behind, standing at the edge of the garden where it had all begun, where the first violation notice had been pinned to my door, where the sound of my daughter's crying had once felt like a crime. Now that same sound drifted faintly from the baby monitor, clipped to my belt, calm and rhythmic. A heartbeat of home. Deputy Harris approached, his steps steady across the brick path. "You did good, Doc," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Most people fold when they get hit with that kind of pressure. You turned it into a case file." "I just wanted my kid to sleep in peace," I said quietly. He nodded. "Sometimes that's how the biggest changes start." He handed me a folded copy of the official court summary. At the top, stamped in black ink, were the words, "State of California, v. Marilyn Dwyer, convicted of invasion of privacy and harassment. Sentence, 40 hours, supervised community service. She starts Monday," he said. "County Daycare Center on Ridgeway. Thought you'd want to know." I thanked him. He lingered for a moment, then gave a small, tired smile. "Take care of that little girl," he said, before heading back to his cruiser. The red taillights disappeared down the street, leaving me alone with the glow of the garden lamps. Emily joined me a moment later, Ella bundled in her arms, her tiny head resting against Emily's shoulder. "You heard?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "Justice looks strange sometimes." "Strange," she agreed, "but fair." The following week, word spread fast. Photos from the courthouse leaked online. Marilyn in community service uniform, hair tied back, face blank as she handed toys to toddlers under a volunteer supervisor's watch. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who'd tried to criminalize a baby's cry was now caring for them. Neighbors printed the article and taped it to the community board at the clubhouse. Someone even added a sticky note beneath it. "The sound of new life wins." For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, the HOA email list carried no threats, no warnings, only updates about garden projects and a new community potluck. Trevor was elected interim president, unopposed. His first act was to abolish the noise fine policy entirely. "A home should never punish a heartbeat," he said at the meeting, and the entire room applauded. I spent the next few evenings repairing what Marilyn's crusade had damaged: Emily's confidence, my trust in our neighbors, and the simple comfort of silence that no longer felt like danger. I built a small bench beside the community garden, the same one where she had once stood to accuse us. It was made from cedar, smooth and sturdy, with a brass plaque engraved, "For the sounds of new life." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Trevor stopped by. His daughter toddled beside him, dragging a stuffed bunny by one ear. "You ever think it'd end like this?" he asked. "Not once," I said. "But I guess sometimes the loudest change starts with a single cry." He smiled at that, glancing toward the bench. "You know, they're calling it the Cole Clause, the new rule about family exemptions." I laughed softly. "Didn't do it for the credit." "Doesn't matter," he said. "You did it right." After he left, I sat on the bench, listening. Somewhere down the row, a wind chime tinkled softly. A dog barked twice and then quieted. A baby laughed. No one rushed to report it. No one reached for a clipboard. The neighborhood finally sounded human again. Emily joined me, placing Ella in my arms. Our daughter's eyes fluttered beneath the amber light, her breathing deep and steady. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "They tried to turn your cry into a violation, and now it's law that protects you instead." Emily smiled. "You think she'll remember any of this?" "No," I said, "but I'll make sure everyone else does." The night breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and rain. For once, peace didn't feel like silence. It felt like belonging. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.